Our second reader this evening has a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in technical communication. He's a member of the Chicago Writers Association and has recently had short stories published in the Chicagoland Journal, Word House, and Dark Dreams. Additionally, he scripted a short film that was released in 2003, and in 2006 received a grant from the DeKalb Council for the Arts to author a series of stories for children. We're pleased to introduce Reagan Keeter.
Hey guys, so I've got some cards in the back. If you like the story, you can find my website with more stories, etc., etc. All right, so let's get started. It's called Out of the Well. There are children down there. That's what Aunt Mary used to say when she came to visit. With shaking hands playing about her matted black hair, averting her tired, sunken eyes, she swore every time she saw me, there are children down there. She was talking about the old stone well in our backyard. Although the only purpose it served when I was growing up was as a conversation starter, I imagined that at one time it was the sole water supply for the area. I imagined it was not simply a deep black hole surrounded by 2 feet of rock, but it had fastened to it a rotating arm that could be used to raise or lower a wooden bucket. Maybe it even had a small slanted roof to keep the rainwater out. Before I was 10, I must have heard Aunt Mary mention the children a dozen times. She's just joking, my mom told me. She's got a bad sense of humor. Don't pay it any attention. Easier said than done. My little girl mind ran wild. How could there be children down there? Shouldn't they have grown up by now? And what did they eat? Bugs? Ew, disgusting. But by the time I was 11, the story no longer scared me. I'm not sure if I'd been scared for so long I couldn't be scared any longer, or if between 10 and 11 I grew up a little. Either way, instead of seeing a haunting black hole so evil no light could penetrate it, I saw what must have once been the centerpiece of an active farm. My house wouldn't have been built back then, nor would any of those around us, and I could imagine the rows of corn stretching across acres of land. I could imagine a young woman holding her parasol as she was escorted by suitors to and from the farm. I could imagine one of those suitors on bended knee in front of the well asking the woman with the parasol to marry him. As I remember, I was sitting in the grass in front of the well with my dolls acting out such a scene when my aunt came over and reminded me once again that there were children down in the well. This time, my mom wasn't there to correct her. She smiled widely when she told me, her hair sticking out every which way in clumps and her bloodshot eyes twinkling. No, there's not, Aunt Mary, I replied. I know that's not true. I'm a big girl now. Stop trying to scare me. She sighed, smoothed back her clumps of hair, then silently went inside. She's just crazy, I said to my dolls. Then holding my handsome suitor in one hand and my parasol-twirling lady in the other, I stood them atop the stones surrounding the well. Hello, my pretty, I said in my best masculine voice while I rocked the dolls back and forth on its heels. Oh, my love, cooed his lady, also rocking on her heels to speak. I've come back for you. I knew you would. Bouncing the dolls to simulate walking, I eased them toward each other. Then, with arms hanging stiffly by their sides, I pressed their heads together and made kissing sounds. Suddenly, I thought I heard laughter from inside the well. A kind of light fluttering tee-hee that almost sounded like it was inside my head. I jumped back a step, my breath caught in my throat, my hands were flexibly releasing the dolls as if holding onto them would keep me tethered to the well. My lady fell onto her face. My beau, who'd been turned almost 90 degrees to facilitate his kiss, clattered onto his back, rolling, skipping across stone, teetering on the edge of the black abyss, rocking, slipping millimeters more, then falling in. Oh no, I thought as I watched his plastic legs slide over the side. Forgetting momentarily about the sparkly laughter, I thought about how mad Mom was going to be when I told her I lost the doll. She just bought it for me, and what did I do? Drop it in the well, that's what. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Probably she'd punish me by taking away my TV privileges for a week or worse. And why did I drop it in the well? Because I thought I heard laughter coming from inside. Double stupid. I was too old to believe in ghosts. I didn't even believe in Santa Claus anymore, so how could I believe in ghosts? Pretending I wasn't afraid, I marched back to the well, my blue dress blowing in the breeze. Leaning over the side, I said, "Hey, ghost, if you're real, why don't you just come up and get me already?" The blackness from the well remained silent. See, no such thing as ghosts. Then, leaning over the well, I realized my doll hadn't fallen to the center of the earth. Instead, its shirt had snagged on the sharp corner of one of the stones, and now it hung precariously just out of reach. Sticking my tongue between my lips the way I did when I was concentrating, I tried to grab it, willing my arm to be longer, millimeters longer, but no luck. Maybe if I got on top of the well, I could reach deeper into the hole, I told myself. So I did. Reaching, straining, stretching, a little closer, as the very tip of my finger touched the doll's head, hope of success coursed through me. But at that moment, when I felt I'd beaten the blackness, outgrown my fear, I slipped, tumbled into the well. It seemed like as soon as I lost my balance, I'd hit bottom. The well wasn't as deep as I'd feared and had long ago dried up. Having landed on my side, my hip throbbed. I groaned and looked up to see the top of the well hopelessly out of reach. I could smell mildew and must and something sickening I can't quite describe. Cloaked in black and gray shadows, I slowly got to my feet. Staring at the hole above, I wanted to call for help. I wanted to cry, but I believed neither would do any good. Nobody was close enough to hear. I was a big girl now, and big girls don't cry. I felt my way along the walls, with stones protruding this way and that. I thought I might be able to climb out. Taking hold of 2 stones above my head, I put my right foot on a third that was about knee-high. But as I lifted myself up, my finger slipped. The stones, worn smooth from years underwater, were too slick to hold on to. Arms spinning, I fell onto my back with a grunt. Then I heard that twinkling laughter again, somehow louder, closer, and yet still far away. I jumped up, looked around, heart pounding. Squinting to examine the shadows, I thought I saw something, and then I didn't. Geez, Rebecca, how can there be anyone down here? Triple stupid. Still, I couldn't escape the feeling I wasn't alone. Then I did hear a voice, and this time I couldn't pretend it was in my head. "Play with us," it said. Maybe a little girl. "Play with us," insisted another, maybe a little boy. "What are you?" I shouted. "What do you want?" I turned in circles, my hands held out in front of me. My vision still adjusting, I was able to see only slightly deeper into those shadows than I could before. "We like you. You're like us." "What do you mean?" I answered, my voice trembling. Suddenly to my right I saw something like a little girl, but all white and frayed at the edges, like she'd been made of paper. Black lips, shapeless gray eyes. I stumbled back, but when I tried to look directly at her, she was gone. Unfortunately, the voices weren't. "We've been so lonely. The other one's not fun anymore." Then I started screaming, but no matter how loud I screamed, I couldn't drown out those voices. "She's mean. All of them are mean." I covered my ears, but I could still hear them. "I don't like her. I don't either." Finally, I heard another voice. Unlike the eerie wind voices, this one was familiar. "Honey, Rebecca, honey, what are you doing down there?" shouted Mom, and when she spoke, the wind voices fell silent. I took my hands off my ears. I opened my eyes. "Mom, get me out of here." "I will, I promise. I'll be right back." She ran away, calling for Dad, and in the minute or so she was gone, the wind voices said again, "We like you." She ran away, calling for Dad, and in the minute or so she was gone. Sorry. We've already moved past that. Hands back over my ears, eyes pinched closed, screaming, crying. "Honey, Mom, we're going to lower a rope down to you. I want you to wrap it around your chest and we'll lift you out." I ran my fingers down my cheeks to wipe away the tears. My eyes darted between the rope that was slowly descending and the shadows all around. I was certain before I was lifted to safety, a gnarled arm, skin gray, nails rotted brown, would grab me and drag me into the earth. However, none did. The rope, I noticed, had been tied into a large loop on the end nearest me. When it arrived, I wrapped the loop over my head and under my arms. Then my parents pulled me up, heaving and grunting as they did so. To keep from injuring myself on the jagged stones, I held my hands out, walking them up the wall. When I was only inches from the lip of the well, my mom lifted me out while my dad held on to the rope. He was blubbering about how afraid she was, how much he loved me, and how I was never ever supposed to play near that well again. My aunt was there too. "I'm glad to see you're okay," she said with a smile. For reasons I couldn't understand at the time, she didn't look quite as crazy in that moment as she had in the past. Her hair was still wild, her hands still shook, but something was different. Soon enough, I would understand why. For years afterward, I dreamed every night about the children that were behind those haunting voices. The boy was 8, he told me. He was skinny, always wearing blue jeans and a faded green t-shirt. His blonde hair was cut straight across his forehead. The girl, his sister, was 6. She wore a Hello Kitty top and a long yellow skirt over blue and red stockings. In my dreams as a child, when we weren't playing games, we would sit and tell stories. In a weird way, they were my best friends. And as the days turned to years, it seemed like somehow I had not been the only one to benefit by my fall into the well. When my aunt came to visit, I noticed her hands had stopped shaking. Her hair was clean. The dark circles around her eyes had faded. She seemed at peace. But then I got older, and the children stopped playing with me. Instead, all night long in my dreams, I would sit on my bed and they would stand by the door staring at me. On occasion, the girl would say, "You think she'll get younger?" "Probably not," the boy would answer. Usually, though, they said nothing. Eventually, I noticed that with every passing dream, their eyes sunk, their skin turned ashen, their lips cracked, scars formed on their faces and arms. And when I turned 18, the dreams changed again. Now I was no longer in my bedroom. In these dreams, I was nowhere. I was simply an observer. I watched a man whom I knew to be their father beat the children. He fractured his son's wrist with his cane. He whipped his daughter's bare back with his belt until her skin was bleeding and raw. And in the most horrific of moments, he threw both children down the well. Night after night, from then on, I watched them suffer inside the well. Screaming, crying, then they desperately struggled to climb the walls until their fingers were shredded and bloody. I watched them get thinner and thinner until they died. The day after they died, I woke up, hopeful the nightmares had finished. By this time, I was not sleeping more than a few hours most nights. My eyes had grown dark, and exhaustion rained havoc on my nervous system, causing me to twitch like my aunt had. I desperately needed a good night's sleep. But it was not to be. That night, the torture started over. The children, alive again, were tossed down the well. And reliving the same moments, they slowly starved to death. And then the next night, the dream started again, at the well. I knew a psychiatrist couldn't help since these were not dreams, but memories forced upon me by the children. I was afraid to take sleeping pills since I didn't know what would happen if I couldn't wake up. So many years later, I am the crazy one. My aunt is happily married and refuses to take my calls, which is frustrating since my mom and dad have both passed and I have no other relatives to turn to. I understand she feels guilty for passing this curse to me. I also understand how desperate she must have been to get rid of it. I am that desperate now. Although no one has told me as much, I'm certain she fell down the well as a child. Thus I can only hope another child will fall down the well and I will pass the curse to them. Homeless and alone, I stay close to that house. There are children down there, I tell any kids I meet, trying to tempt them to explore the well. I'm so desperate to be free of these nightmares, I'm tempted to throw a child down the hole. I'm tempted to promise them buried treasure at the well's bottom or other riches that would engage the imagination. But I don't, because if I do, I fear the ghost children will hate me even more than they do already. And perhaps then they won't follow the curse to a new victim, but instead stay to torture me. So I tell them the truth. There are children down there. Thank you.